Okay, welcome to Did Syd Saucerful of Seesaw Set Daylight, and that title kind of explains what I'd like to do with this episode. I'd like to try and break down four songs: Seesaw, Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, Remember a Day, and Let There Be More Light from the Saucerful of Secrets album. Now that album is a transitionary album, of course. Piper at the Gates of Dawn was released previous year, and the band kind of had to move on without Mr. Barrett in some capacity. Now, some people think that Mr. Barrett continued to work with the band. Some people think that he was directing things. Some people think he was completely out. And of course, there are still songs on this album that have Mr. Barrett in them. So, Jug Band Blues, of course, and then a bit of guitar work on a few songs, or perhaps just on Remember a Day, if I remember correctly. So what I'd like to do is kind of go through four songs pretty quickly: Let There Be More Light, Remember a Day, Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, and Seesaw. And we're going to see if we can trace any kind of Mr. Barrett's fingerprints on those songs, and we'll give him our Syd score like we've done before. Now, previously we did Paintbox, that was a Syd score of 4, and Julia Dream we did with a Syd score of 18, which is currently our highest rated Syd song. Now, before we start, normally I go through corrections, and I'd like to give three corrections real quick. Now, the first correction is that in my latest Peeling Syd Barrett, episode 24, I discuss a certain wordplay in the song Birdie Hop, and in that we discuss the word combination of assorted promenades and also antelope and parasol, and I kind of break down why those are interesting words, why those are interesting word combinations. And I just like to point out that that style of word combination was first pointed out to me by Sudarshana in the comments section of an old episode, and they brought it up again in the episode 24 description, and I really appreciate when people go in and make comments and kind of point out things like this, because it helps, I think, identify some of the things that are tendencies of Mr. Barrett. And you never know what people are going to notice. Obviously, for some reason, Sudarshana recognized the importance of assorted promenades, and I think a normal person would not necessarily have picked up on that. Of course, now we're dealing with words that are each 3 syllables, and they have very similar sounds within them. If you rearrange the order of the vowels and consonants in there, you can get a lot of similar sounds. So with assorted promenades, you have the S, the A, and not just the same letters, but also the same sounds. So sorted, odds, promenades, and ed is in there as well. Now, antelope parasol, which is from Birdie Hop, is also very similar. They both have the P, the T, the L sound, the P and the L sound, and the antelope parasol, and the A and the E in antelope make the same sound as well. So it's a rearranging, I guess, of sorts, or it's a similarity between those two words that perhaps makes them more agreeable to a listener or a reader when they recognize those. And we'll get into that in a little bit, what some of the implications of that might be. Now, the other correction that I'd like to discuss is the use that I had of the term in Birdie Hop of the hectachrome plane. So I mentioned that was Greek, and it is Greek, but hecta is not the same as hexa. So for some reason I was thinking hexa, and I think it might be because of the fact that hectachrome, now there's another 3-syllable word, and it sounds a lot to me like another word, which kind of perhaps threw me off, and that is the word hecatomb. And I believe that a hecatomb, I'll have to look it up. I keep getting in trouble with this because I keep going off of memory and thoughts and opinions on what I think things are, but I believe the terminology of hecatomb was kind of throwing me off for whatever reason, and so I just assumed that it was related, but the truth is hexa is 6, and hecta means 100, so hectachrome by literal definition would be 100 colors. And why Mr. Barrett would be saying that there's a hectachrome plane or a mini-colored plane or a 100-colored plane, I don't know. Perhaps that's a reference to the world being a 100-colored plane. I don't know if that's what his intent is there, but it certainly is a possibility. So now a hecatomb is apparently a place of a great public sacrifice, originally of 100 oxen. So they would I guess make some kind of sacrifice of 100 oxen. I don't know. And of course the word isn't hecatomb, it's hectachrome, but I would like to point out that once you start making word associations based on sound, you can invent words that imply other words. And I don't know that that's what's going on, but it is interesting that those two words, hecatomb and hectachrome, are so similar. So that's the second correction there, is that hecta and hectachrome means 100. Now, the last thing that I'd like to discuss is I just did Julia Dream. So we did a review of Did Syd Barrett Julia Dream? And one of the word combinations that I thought was interesting is Velvet Bride. And something that I didn't really mention is that this could simply be a person that is into fashion or into wearing a lot of fashionable clothes. And I guess that there are other possible ways to interpret the velvet modifier of Velvet Bride, but I didn't really go into the idea that it's simply someone who is really into fashion and is into, I guess, velvet styles and things like that. So I didn't really discuss that angle on it, but it certainly is possible. So that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty good summation of what I wanted to capture with corrections, and I think it's time to move on. So let's go ahead then and look at some of the lyrics and see if we can trace any influence of Mr. Barrett in some of the songs from Saucerful of Secrets. And the first one I'm going to look at is Seesaw, which is not, I guess you could say, not the most popular song that they ever put together, but there is an aspect to it that I kind of want to point out that could be interpreted as being related to or influenced by Mr. Barrett. Now, this song is attributed to Rick Wright as writer, so I don't know the history of Rick Wright, in my defense. So some of these things may be part of his life as well. I don't know. Well, let's look at the song Seesaw. So if you would, I'm going to link different versions of the songs, hopefully with lyrics, in the description, or you can just pull up the words on your phone, or better yet, go listen to the song and then come back and we'll discuss each in turn. So the first one is Seesaw, and the first line is, Marigolds are in love. Now there's a very and a love, so that's an inline rhyme. You could just say Marigolds are in love, but there's a modifier there that's very, and that's inline clanging. So I'm going to give that a point. And I'm also going to point out that the term marigolds, we just did Birdie Hop and the use of plants and animals to represent people. And marigolds, I'm sure, have some kind of symbolic meaning, but I do know, and we'll pick up later, you can see in the third line, it's the discussion about a sister, and there's a use of the word marigold. So it is possible, I just want to point out, that Syd's younger sister was named roseMARY. So he may be making a nickname there. He had a tendency for nicknames. I don't know that he necessarily would throw the person's name into the nickname. I haven't seen that before. But it is possible. So I'm going to give that a point. So that's 2 points total so far. It says that he doesn't mind. I don't know who he is. I'm assuming it's the person that's writing the song. There's a mention of picking up this sister and then going to Seesaw Land. I don't see anything. There's nothing there really, other than the repeat of way. So makes his way, and then the next line is all the way she smiles. So it's a little bit odd in structure, but I don't. It's really hard to say that is the type of rhythm that Mr. Barrett. It doesn't feel the same to me, and that's just subjective, but it just doesn't feel the same as the rhythm that Mr. Barrett put together, in my opinion. There's a mention of her going up and he's going down. Of course, depending upon this was written, Mr. Barrett was going through a number of breakups and difficult relationships, so perhaps that is a reference there. And I'll just point out that the reference to him going down also is in other songs later on in his career. I realized that this song would predate that, so he could simply be copying this song. But I'm going to go ahead and say that it's something that is an indicator of Mr. Barrett at any rate, even if it's just influence, so that's 3. What he means by that, it's hard to say, but of course there's the metaphor towards seesaw, which obviously always has one person going up while the other person is going down. There's a mention of sitting on a stick in the river. I don't totally get the sitting on a stick thing. I guess perhaps something like a scarecrow, which he discussed before, sits on a stick, but I'm not going to give that a point. I will say though that there is again in line clanging on the I sound. So sits, stick, river, in. So I mean that's a repetitive use of that I sound in that line. So I'm going to give that another point. There's a mention of a river, which is pretty consistent with Mr. Barrett's work. He has a tendency to highlight mountains and bodies of water, particularly rivers, for whatever reason. So let's give that a point. We're at 5. Laughter in asleep, and the next line is I don't really see much in the laughter in his sleep thing. Sister throwing stones, hoping for a hit. I don't really see much there. Other than, again, there's clanging on the S and the T sounds. So I guess I'll give that a point for clanging on in the S and the T sounds. So we're at 6 points. Again, there's the chorus of going up while he goes down, another time, another day. A mention of the brother leaving. Now, there was a time when Mr. Barrett did leave his family, so I'll give that a point, where he was absent from the family for a bit. And we'll go down to the next verse about plastic flowers. Again, clanging on the S sound. Shields selling plastic flowers with L's, so S and L's are heavy in that line. I'm going to give that another point, so that's 8. Continues with Sunday afternoon. Then picking up weeds. No, she doesn't have time to care. All can see he's not there. So there definitely was a time when Mr. Barrett was considered to be kind of, perhaps had gone through a bit of a distancing, or perhaps that kind of vacant stare. It's been referenced by many people so he's not there. And of course there's a song, She's Not There. I can't remember the name of that song, but that's an interesting word choice there. He's not there to finish up that line. That may be referencing She's Not There, the song, which Mr. Barrett has a tendency also to do, to reference other songs. So I guess I'll give that a point. So we're at 10. There's a mention of her then growing up for another man, so he's down. And the implication of the total tone of this, I'll just kind of point out, is, of course, that there's a close relationship between a brother and a sister, and it's being broken by her falling for another man, or perhaps admiring another man, or perhaps no longer having time to look up to someone that she may have been looking up to before. I'll give that one more point, just because of the general feel of that and the relationship between Miss roseMARY and Mr. Barrett. So that's 11 points total in this song. And I'll point out again that I don't know the relationship of Rick Wright with any members of his family. Perhaps he has a similar relationship with someone. Overall, I can definitely see why people might think that this was influenced in some way by Mr. Barrett, but I'm not going to score this one as high as a song like Julia Dream. So let's move on to the next song, which is Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun. And this song kind of took over for Astronomy Domine with the band, and it makes sense because it's definitely an easier song to sing, in my opinion. It's just kind of whispering, and if you really are into Pink Floyd, I would say you could listen to this song repeatedly and never even realize that it kind of has lyrics to it, because all the lyrics are just kind of whispered so quietly by Mr. Waters, I believe, is whispering the lyrics. So let's kind of discuss what these lyrics might be, and we'll give this song a Syd score. It starts off with setting controls for the heart of the sun. Now, the sun, I'm going to say I'll give a point for that because we've repeatedly seen references to the sun and the moon, and of course other astral bodies as well. Sunshine, of course, is mentioned in apples and oranges, and the sun is repeated for various reasons. Little by little, night is turning around. I'm just trying to feel this out. I guess no, I just don't see it. So I'm looking for inline clanging, inline rhyming, and I don't totally see it. So, and then counting leaves which tremble and turn. That's a very interesting imagery of counting leaves which are trembling and turning. But I still don't really, I guess I'll give a point for the trembling and turning and the repeat of turning. So I'll give that 1 point for that. So we're at a Syd score of 2. There's a reference in the next line to lotuses leaning. Now, a lotus is a very specific type of flower, and of course, plants and flowers and animals, we've noted, Mr. Barrett seems to pick with intention. So, why would lotuses lean? I'll just kind of point out that Mr. Barrett was interested in Saint Amant. We've discussed that previously. I believe that was in our Matilda Mother episode, and there are many photographs of him actually being in poses of yoga, or in yoga poses. Now, the lotus is specifically very important to the Hindu faith. It represents things like rebirth and enlightened spirituality for Hindus. So it is possible that this is a reference to that, and of course Mr. Barrett, we know, was interested in those things, so I'll give that a point. We're at 3 points now. The next bit is over the hills, a swallow is resting, and then I don't really see anything there other than the where swallow. So I'll give that an inline clang of the W sound, which he's done before as well. So we're at 4. The next bit is over the mountains, watching the watcher. Now, we of course had the Misty Riders over the mountain, etc. before, so I'll give that another point for the mountain reference. And then watching the watcher. Now, I don't recall a specific use of watcher, but definitely the idea of watching one another and being watched. That was all covered in I Can See You, But You Can't See Me, which I believe was in Flaming, the song Flaming from Piper at the Gates of Dawn. So I'll give that another point. Let's see. Breaking Darkness and Waking a Grapevine. So breaking is rhyming with waking. Darkness and grapevine. Again, this is all very subjective now. I'm just kind of going through and tasting these words in my head to see if I see any connections between them that are consistent with what I've seen from Mr. Barrett before. I'll just kind of point out that there's a clanging there with an R and a K. Breaking, darkness, waking, grapevine. So I'll give that one more point for the inline clanging. Morning, birth, born to shadow. Obviously there's a repetitive use of B, and morning and born is in line rhyme. I'll give that one more point. It's a very interesting combination of words there. Next is love is shadow, ripens wine. So ripen and wine are using the same I sound. Love. I don't, and I'm also kind of trying to figure out the meaning of what these might be. I have not seen a lot of these words used by Mr. Barrett before, so I'm not going to give a point for that. Again, the repetition of Controls to the Heart of the Sun. I'm not going to do repeat points for the exact same chorus. The next is the man arrives at the wall. And of course, if you're familiar with Pink Floyd, right there is a reference to the wall, which could be, geez, I mean, that could be quite extensive planning, if not consideration of the idea of the wall, which of course is an album that they produced later. For that extensive planning, foresight, we've mentioned that before as a Mr. Barrett tendency to organize thoughts like that, so we'll give that one more point. We're at 9. Next line is making shape, questions at asking. Now questions, of course, has the sh sound, same as shape. Asking does not. I don't really see it. So let's do the next line. Thinking the sun will fall in the evening. So thinking and evening, of course, are rhyming, and they rhyme with the asking above and making to begin the line previously. That repetitive rhyme, inline rhyme, at the beginning and the end of the sentence we've seen him do before. I'll give that another point at 10. We're at 10 points now. And the will he remember and the lesson of giving. Now, of course, the lesson of giving has to do with immateriality, if that makes sense, or the idea of not being driven by goals connected to money. So I will give that one more point. That we're at 11, and then it just repeats Heart of the Sun. So for set the controls, we also have a Syd score of an 11. Now let's go ahead and move on then to Remember a Day. Now I'm going to try and link a version of Remember a Day that has just the song, just the musical aspects of it without anyone singing. And it's interesting, you can really hear Mr. Barrett's guitar work on that, and it's very, very kind of creepy. So, I mean, we'll give that a point right away because of the guitar work. So we know already he had some hand in this song. Let's go ahead then and look at the lyrics and see what we can figure out. Now, I believe Pink Floyd 61 has an animated version of this song, which is really cool, so I'll link that as well if you want to check that out. It fits the feel of the song really well, in my opinion, so let's go ahead and look through the lyrics. It starts off with, remember a day before today. And of course the remember is really long and drawn out. We keep seeing this kind of long vowel use on a bunch of their songs, but I don't know, perhaps I'm missing it, but I don't really remember Mr. Barrett drawing out a whole bunch of words. I don't want to know. I don't know that I want to say that that's a tendency of his. Although I guess it could be with the ooh ah from Astronomy Domine. But at any rate, it's not solid enough for me to give it a point, so I don't think I can. The next line is the day when you were young. Now, Mr. Barrett often uses the ideas of youth in his songs, and you definitely get a feel for a certain amount of desire to return to that age, so I'll give that another point. We're at 2. There's a mention of the next line, free, play alone, time, evening never came. Again, it's drawn out, free, and then play alone with time, evening never came. That is a very interesting rhythm with a finality to it in the evening never came. So I'm going to give that a point because of the rhythm of it. That does feel somewhat like Mr. Barrett, where he establishes a rhythm and then he gives a finality, a final line that is out of step with the rest of what he's delivered to give a finality to an idea. The next line is sing a song that can't be sung, which is remarkably like the lyrics to All You Need Is Love, where there's nothing you can do that can't be done. Anyway, that's a very interesting combination of words, and it does remind me of another song, so I'm going to give that 2 points. So we're at 5. There's a mention of a morning kiss without morning's kiss. Now I don't really see anything there. Queen, you shall be it if you wish. So there again, we're seeing the same odd rhythm, and then look for your king. So that's a double royal reference. We've already noted that Mr. Barrett had a tendency early in his career to use this royal reference, and it's another odd rhythm use, so a 3 with a finality. Again, a restatement of why can't they play and why can't they stay that way, which is, again, a kind of yearning for youth, so I'll give that another point. There's a mention of climbing an apple tree in the next line, climb your favorite apple tree. Is there anything in there? No, not really. I will say favorite and tree is an interesting combination because of the RT, but there's not enough there for me to feel like it's that it's a Mr. Barrett inclination. So, and then try to catch the sun. I guess the TR is continued in the next line, so I'll kind of tentatively give that 1 more point. So we're at 10. Hide from little brother's gun. And then there's a mention of dream yourself away, so the dreaming reference is a Barrett inclination. I'll give that another point. Then the little brother's gun thing doesn't make sense to me at all. He didn't have a little brother, and I don't know that he was playing a lot with his older siblings, so he may have. Maybe that's a self-reference to him being the little brother, but of course roseMARY was his younger sister, so as we just mentioned in Seesaw. Now, this again involves a lot of familial relations. We've already established that Mr. Barrett and Matilda Mother was examining familial relations to some degree. And I'll just point out, for people that do believe that he was perhaps invisibly providing these, that discussing people close to you is something that a lot of comedians do and a lot of other people do in music, and it's difficult to do because you obviously don't want to embarrass them or give up too information. Of course, if you're doing it all anonymously, people won't necessarily know who you're talking about, and another way to hide things is to disguise the name, so they're not able to know exactly who you're talking about. You can always just say, well, I was just talking about someone figuratively, or it was just completely made up. But the truth is, in my opinion, writing things that are real and slightly changing them is much easier, because things happen every day that you can write about. If you use your experience and you just twist it a little bit so it's not recognizable to other people, you can write about anything you want and you never run out of material. So, well, let's go ahead and move on then. There's a mention about reaching the sun. Now, obviously, we can't actually reach the sun. Why can't we go there? That doesn't make any sense unless you're using it in perhaps a spiritual or a religious sense. So there's a spiritual or religious possibility, so we'll give that another point. We're at 12. And finally, blowing the years away. Is again another desire to return to youth, so I'll give that another point. So 13 total for Remember a Day. Why blow the years away. There is again an in-line clang on the W sound, so why we blow away. So I'll give that one more point. We're at 14. And that's it for Remember a Day. A song that definitely does feel like it could have been put together by Mr. Barrett or influenced by him. And as we said, perhaps the band is simply just kind of copying the way that he puts together music. But these word combinations are very, very interesting, and they're not easily kind of put together, in my opinion. Now, I've saved this one for last because Let There Be More Light is the strangest song on this album. And there are some very, very weird things here. And part of the problem, of course, with registering a fingerprint on someone like Mr. Barrett is that he was varied. I guess you could say he was varied by nature. So if you look at Piper at the Gates of Dawn, the music types across that are so, I guess you could say, unrelated to one another, that it definitely does give the feeling of someone who has a lot of interests and wants to dabble in many things and experiment. So it's hard to develop a fingerprint and apply it going forward. And in fact, as you move forward, it probably would become less and less accurate, because they will have changed over time if they are the kind of person that really wants to change and make new things. Ideally, it'll still have some things that show as inclinations, particularly if you pay attention to themes, though what people consider and write about over time would also be changing. At any rate, this song has a lot of odd things in it, and let's go ahead then and we'll run through them really quick and see what we can figure out. All right? So the first thing I want to note is that there's a kind of this very heavy rhythm to it. This da 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 da, and it is heavy-handed, which is not something that typically reminds me of Mr. Barrett. It actually reminds me of Mr. Waters. Oh, I should point out who's actually writing each one of these songs. So, Seesaw is attributed to Rick Wright. We mentioned that. Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun is attributed to Mr. Waters. Remember a Day is attributed to Rick Wright. And this song, Let There Be More Light, is attributed to Roger Waters again. Now, on the first album, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, was Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk, which was very heavy-handed rhythm and was written by Mr. Roger Waters. This song has that same feel to it, in my opinion, so I'm going to subtract a point actually. So we're going to start off with -1, okay? And the reason for that is that it has a really heavy rhythm in it, and it kind of holds to it. Now, Let There Be More Light reminds me of chapter 24 with the light increasing. So I'm going to add a point where we're going to start off at 0 just from the title. So we're back to 0. Okay. Now there's a mention of just going through the lyrics. Now this is going to be hard now because he's just repeating words. So for the entirety of this, I'm going to say Mr. Barrett, yes, did have a tendency to repeat words, to repeat sounds, but he's not using variety to do it. So I'm going to give 1 point just for that, just one time, because I'm not going to do it for each one of these times that he's repeating a word. We'd end up, I think, skewing the scale. So far away, way, and then people heard say, I'll find a way, there'll come a day, and something will be done. Again, there's a finality to the last bit. You'll notice that each line is ending in the long A sound, and then something will be done, period. End of a rhyme. That is a Barrett tendency, so I'll give that one point there. Then starts this kind of chorus that's not really a chorus, about a mighty ship, vast mighty ship, descending point of flame. I don't see anything in there that's clanging. Made contact, human race, at Mildenhall. Again, there's a finality. I don't even see, it's very loose in construction. Ship, flame, race, hall. Flame and hall are, no, I don't see it. I don't, made contact at Mildenhall. I just don't see it. It doesn't feel like these words were put together. They're definitely delivering an idea, which is totally new to Pink Floyd, of perhaps this spaceship, which appears to be coming to kind of discussing the idea of a spaceship, but which is new for them. But I just want to point out the time of this is around the time that there was a space race to get to the moon. So I'm not exactly sure. July of '69 was the moon landing. I wrote it down over here. So obviously the U.S. and President Kennedy's speech. I'm not exactly sure when he gave his speech about going to the moon. Trying to do those things because they are hard. So I don't know when he gave that speech. I want to say it was maybe 2 years prior to that. But certainly the world was watching space, so that would have been a very pop thing to discuss. And Mr. Barrett, of course, did mention space before, but not in this way, not in the idea of traveling in a spaceship and dealing with other people and other races. Now, I will point out that this made contact human race at Mildenhall, there was a kind of a Laken Heath, and I can't read my note here, but there was a strange incident of UFOs on 13 August 56 in eastern England. Laken Heath is the first word that I've written down here. But and there was the later Rendlesham Forest incident in December of '80, which was also in kind of the same area. So I don't totally know what's going on there with that. Perhaps that had driven into the English conscience a kind of interest in UFOs. Maybe that's going on. But at any rate, that's new. I can't tie that to Mr. Barrett, so I won't give any points for that. Now, I think I've seen some lyrics that were slightly different from this, so I'm going to kind of look for another set of lyrics here when we're done. I seem to remember something about some elders or something like that, but at any rate, let's keep going. So there's a repeat of now is a time, time to be aware. It's all kind of creepy. I guess I'll give the key signature a creepy feel, so I'll give a point for that. But we're still only at 3 points. Carter's father saw him there, and then knew the road revealed to him. There's a mention of a living soul, and hereward the wake. Now, if you're not familiar with English history, and I did not know hereward the wake, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He was a bit of a, I believe he was Anglo-Saxon, and he was resisting Norman conquest after the Battle of Hastings in the same areas that these UFO incidents are kind of taking place in eastern England. And I can't remember who fought it at the Battle of Hastings. I know, of course, William the Conqueror, but I believe it was Alfred II was the Anglo-Saxon leader that was defeated. Harold or Alfred, maybe Harold. I can't recall. But at any rate, there was an Anglo-Saxon resistance to Norman conquest, and it was apparently kept by this guy Hereward the Wake. There may be more going on, and I bet if you get into the mythology of this man, of this person, Hereward, that you will see some kind of strange stories that have to do with lights and other things going on. And perhaps the English would be familiar with those folk tales, but I certainly am not. So I'm very limited in my ability to understand the connection between this man and his living soul and a discussion about space lights and UFOs. So I'll apologize for not being able to understand that connection. Something in the eye, something in the sky, waiting for me. I mean, it's definitely creepy, but I don't really get a Barrett tendency there. Next is an outer lock, rolling slowly back. That is an inline clang on the L sound. So I'll give that 1 point. Servicemen, heard to sigh. There is an R and an sound. Men, heard. So I'll give that 1 more point. We're at 5. For there revealed, and there's another sound there. Revealed, glowing robes. So there's a reference to glowing robes. And Lucy in the Sky. Now, Lucy in the Sky is of course a Beatles song. So there is a reference to a possible pop culture or Beatles song. And of course, not only is that a reference to a Beatles song, it's also a song that was recorded on the Sgt. Pepper album, which was being recorded at exactly the same time that and in the same studio, mind you, that Pink Floyd was recording Piper at the Gates of Dawn. So I will give that 1 more point. So we're at 7 now. And something in cosmic art, glowing from toes, psychic emanations flowed. So art, I'll give a point for an art reference, though normally he doesn't say art. He would say something like painting. Something cosmic art, glowing slightly from his toes, and then flows. So glowing and flow and toes is all the O, that kind of O sound. I'll give 1 last point for that. So we're going to finish this song with a 9, a Syd score of a 9. I think that's fair enough. That's a very difficult kind of a song to run through because, of course, all of this is quite subjective in many ways. You have to do it kind of by feel. People could definitely, in my opinion, say there are more or less connections there than I've scored, but I feel pretty confident that that's at least reasonable. That's at least a reasonable kind of score there for that. I'm going to give this a score of 9. Now, I'm going to look through lyrics from a different group. Aha, yes, there is a different set of lyrics. And this has this has some different things here. There is at least one additional line. There's Carter's father saw it there and knew the role revealed to him before the hero would awake. Now the role, R-H-U-L-L, I don't know what the heck the role are, and I do wonder if, you know, I want to say there's a scroll or something like that. We know Mr. Barrett read some comic books. We've documented that previously, and we also know he was into things like Dan Dare. So I don't know if this is kind of the idea of a role, R-H-U-L-L. I have tried to look that up, and I can't find any connection to any science fiction book or any science fiction movie or other idea. So I really don't know what to make of that. But it does appear, because it's capitalized, that it is perhaps a reference to some greater being or greater race of beings, I don't know, from beyond the beyond, or whatever you want to call it. So perhaps that is going on, and I swear I saw something about elders, but perhaps that's another song, so I'll just have to leave that for now. That extra line about role revealing, I'm not going to give any points for that, so we're still at the same score of a 9. So that's pretty much it, I guess, for this episode. I wanted to get those 4 songs done because I don't have a really strong feel for them. This album deserves to be talked about. I feel like it's a pretty good album. It's not as good as Piper at the Gates of Dawn, but it does have its moments. Specifically, Remember a Day, I think, is a very enjoyable song. I really like that song. Let There Be More Light, I kind of enjoy if it wasn't such a ponderous rhythm. And I guess that's pretty much it. That's Remember a Day is pretty much the song from this album, in my opinion. That's the song that I feel has the heaviest Barrett influence. It has a very fluid feel to it. It's a very expressive song. And that one we scored as a 14. So I'll go ahead and post up all the songs we reviewed to this point in time. And that's it for our review for today. I'll come out with another Did Syd relational video later on. And hopefully I can focus on perhaps maybe 1 or 2 songs at the most. In the next one, I think it's more rewarding to give one song our full attention, but perhaps I'm not really giving all of these songs all of the attention they deserve, but I do feel like it's appropriate, and I don't want to get too caught up in insignificant details. So that's it for today. If you haven't subscribed, please like, share, subscribe. Again, don't feel nervous about throwing comments out. I appreciate the comments. I want to thank Sudarshana again for throwing ideas at me. It's very rewarding, and it also helps me consider these things. So it's a kind of a, I know I'm putting together the videos, so it doesn't feel like it's a cooperative process, but in a lot of ways I think it is. So that's all for today. I'll talk to you folks later.